In today's Technology 4 era, whenever the weather app warns that storms and rain will drag on for an entire week, what do we usually do? Most likely, we click our tongues, quickly book a ride, or order a pile of fast food through an app, then crawl straight into a warm bedroom, turn on the two-way air conditioner, wrap ourselves in a thick blanket, and scroll through Netflix or TikTok in a trance. The patter of rain outside the soundproof window suddenly becomes an extremely chill lo-fi beat, a perfect excuse for people to skip class, ask for a day off, dodge work, and be lazy, with complete legitimacy. For a body spoiled by the comforts of the 21st century, a storm is, at worst, just a light maintenance session from nature, something that only gets in the way of going out for sidewalk iced tea. But try clearing the cache and deleting all that romanticized thinking about weather. Take your reinforced concrete apartment, block your heater, your waterproof jacket, and your smartphone, and throw them straight into a black hole. Rewind the axis of time to 40,000 years ago, the Stone Age, when we're sapient. Ancestors still wore loincloths, went bare-chested, and walked through the wilderness carrying stone spears. In a naked, primitive world, rain was not a romantic weather phenomenon. A week of endless rain was a brutally cruel biological lockdown, a death sentence hanging over your head. The harshest hardware test Mother Nature could throw down to wipe out weak builds. When black clouds covered the sky and icy drops began pouring down day after day, the real survival war was activated. Today, I am going to expose what our ancestors had to do so they would not be logged out of Earth, would not go insane, and would not slaughter one another while being trapped for a whole wet week in an ecological prison cell. First, we have to talk about the most terrifying physical killer of rainy days: blood, pressure crashing, and the body shutting down from hypothermia. In terms of weather-resistant hardware, primitive humans were a disastrous buggy version of nature. We did not have fancy wax-coated waterproof feathers like birds, nor did we have a thick insulating layer of fat like seals or polar bears. Our bare skin, when exposed to cold rain for a long time, was a deadly heat loss vulnerability. Science has shown that water draws heat from the body 25 times faster than dry air if you stand under heavy rain for about 30 minutes. And then a wild gust of wind blows through, your core body temperature can plummet without breaks. The body's internal heating system has to run at maximum power, forcing muscle fibers to contract again and again to create heat. But once the calories run out, the operating system starts disabling the limbs. Your arms and legs go numb and stiff, frozen like rotten logs. Next, the brain starts to lag, falling into confusion and hallucination. Finally, the main hardware officially shuts down. The heart stops beating, sending you off with a permanent logout ticket in absolute cold. Because of that lethal risk, when the rain began to last, survival rule number 1 kicked in. Never let the body become soaked. The whole tribe had to run at once to find shelter. Caves were the 5-star hotels, the VIP survival fortresses of prehistory. But here is the nasty part. Humans were not the only ones afraid of rain. The serious monsters out there, cave lions, short-faced bears, giant wolves, were also searching every rock hollow for shelter. Crawling into a cave to avoid the rain often turned into bloody combat. If you accidentally stepped into a cave where a bear family was already staying, congratulations, you had just served yourself up as a fresh meat buffet. If your tribe was strong enough and ruthless enough to take a cave, the next job was to defend it at all costs. And the only weapon, the only firewall that kept predators from creeping closer was fire, keeping a flame alive. With soaked firewood for an entire week was a mission that gambled with the life of the whole group. If the fire went out, everyone was in deep trouble. Once the system error of temperature was partly fixed, the survival matrix immediately threw a second bug in our ancestors' algae faces, one far more miserable and persistent, the hunger that clawed through the digestive system. The sapiens' body is a massive calorie-burning machine, especially when the environment gets colder. The reactor inside the stomach has to burn twice or three times as much energy as usual just to keep life running. But outside, rain is whitening the world. The ground is slippery mud, and visibility does not go beyond 5 meters. Grabbing a stone spear and leaving the cave to hunt prey in nonstop rain was one of the stupidest decisions a hunter could make. Wild animals had brains too. They also hid away in dens and hollows to preserve body heat. Hunting in the rain not only failed to bring in even a scrap of meat, it also delivered you straight into the trap of hypothermia or sent you slipping off a cliff and smashing your skull. The tribe's logistics supply chain was officially broken. So how could 30 hungry mouths avoid starving, drying out, and wasting away through 7 days and 7 nights of storms? This was exactly when the software of intelligence, the superior IQ of Homo sapiens, came into play. They survived thanks to the ability to run future prediction algorithms, the ability to back up food data from sunny days. Have you ever wondered why, whenever the rain starts to fall lightly and the air turns cool, your stomach automatically cries out for greasy, grilled food, steaming bowls of instant noodles, or sweet things loaded with calories? That is not a random preference. It is an ancient survival command line encoded deep in DNA through tens of thousands of generations. The brain is reminding you it is raining. You cannot go outside, so stuff calories into your stomach now before you starve. Prehistory had no refrigerator to survive rainy lockdown days long before the storm arrived. When they brought down a huge wild ox, they did not eat it all at once. They used stone knives to slice the meat into thin strips, dried it under harsh sunlight, or smoked it over fire. Smoke and heat disabled the protective membranes of bacteria, creating a natural antibacterial shell and turning fresh meat into rock-hard trail rations. They stored those dry, tough strips of meat together with rendered animal fat deep inside the cave walls. And so, when the storm came, the whole tribe would huddle together and drag out those foul-smelling slabs of meat to chew until their jaws ached. It was not delicious at all. It was bland and stinkingly foul, but it was calories. It was life. It was the only life raft keeping the system from shutting down. Cold and hunger had been temporarily controlled. But once the stomach was partly full, an invisible threat, disgusting and far more horrifying, began to appear. Science calls it cabin fever, the madness of confined space, combined with a biologically polluted atmosphere that insulted the sense of smell, set up the cave scene again. Around 30 to 40 people were packed into a tiny, dark, damp cave space. The only exit had been blocked with animal hides or barriers to stop the wind and predators, and I need you to use the full power of your imagination to picture the smell in there. You have probably gone drinking, sat in an air-conditioned room, and felt dizzy and nauseous the moment a few lazy bath dodgers with armpit odor took off their shoes, right? In the primitive age, soap did not exist. These prehistoric people might go an entire year without knowing what bathing was. They wore animal skins that had not been properly tanned, covered with rancid fat, dried blood, and mud. Their bodies were caked with sour layers of sweat. Even more horrifying, a storm was raging outside, and predators were lurking, so nobody dared to leave the cave to answer nature's call. They had to go to the toilet straight into a hurriedly dug pit in the far corner of the cave. Feces, urine, blood, smell, spoiled smoked meat, fermented sweat, all heated by the campfire, created a thick biological gas mixture, so foul and bizarre it could knock out the nose of any modern human in 1 second. That toxic atmosphere eroded their nervous systems hour by hour. Homo sapiens are creatures who need movement, running, and constant activity. Now, with their hardware locked inside a stinking cage. Excess energy had nowhere to escape, and the stress hormone cortisol shot up. The suppressed psychological pressure made their nervous systems thinner and more irritable than ever. One snore that was too loud from the person next to them, one dirty look, one accidental bump, or one unfairly divided piece of fatty meat could be enough to activate a bloody riot. In that cramped space, if they lost control and pulled out stone knives to stab one another, the result would be the collapse of the tribe's core labor force. Blood inside the cave would also attract predators. That madness and psychological pressure was a ticking bomb threatening to wipe out the entire group from within. So how did our ancestors hack that rotten psychological error? How did they keep 40 overheated? Heads from jumping at each other and tearing one another apart? That was one of the greatest moments, one of the most shocking software updates in evolutionary history. The birth of art, language, and religion. To distract the brain from frustration and madness, they had to invent forms of entertainment. Hunters could not go outside to throw spears, picked up wet pieces of prussian charcoal from the fire, gathered red earth, crushed it, and mixed it with animal fat and saliva. Then they began smearing it on the cave wall. At first it was only unconscious scribbling, but little by little, under the ghostly flicker of firelight, their brains were stimulated. They drew the shadows of mighty wild cattle and herds of wild deer. They pressed their handprints onto stone like a hard declaration. I am here, and I still have not logged out. Cave art was not born for fine art exhibitions. It was born as stress therapy, humanity's first entertainment app, a way to buy time through boring, stormy days. And when night fell, to restrain the fear of roaring thunder, they gathered around the fire and began telling stories. With primitive words, they exaggerated hunting victories. At a higher level, their brains started inventing fiction and turning nature into gods. The thunder outside was the anger of divine beings. They whispered stories of ghosts and demons, legends that explained phenomena they could not understand. Religion and belief were born from rainy day fires like that. They created a shared operating system of ideas, shackled violence, and bound those smelly, frightened people into one undefeated unit. It turns out that the matrix of those dark, rainy days was not a prison, but a great incubator that forced the sapiens' brain to evolve and give birth to culture and art. The blood of those stubborn, creative, elite survivors is still running wildly through your veins. So the next time you lie there listening to the rain, be proud that you are a descendant of those who hacked through every limit of nature. Drop me a like, comment, and do not forget to subscribe to keep watching the next wild expose of history. See, you guys